Um, so I expect there might be one or two people here who have heard of YouTube. Yeah? Yeah, YouTube's this thing where you can look at videos on the internet. Yeah? So you can look at videos, and there's all kinds of stuff on, well, there's all kinds of stuff on the internet. There's all kinds of stuff on YouTube. But there was this real interesting YouTube video of strangers kissing. Have you heard about this? Very interesting. They got 20 people together who didn't know each other. And they had a camera going, and they didn't talk to him or anything. They just stood in front of the camera. And these strangers kissed one another in front of the camera. They didn't call me, in case you're wondering. But it's really interesting what happens when they do this, because you can see some of them kind of do this, you know, or they're leaning back. You know, they don't quite know what to do, you know, because, you know, a kiss is a kind of an intimate thing. Something, you know, I can't quite imagine. No, I can't imagine it. I'm not thinking of it right now. But they would sort of laugh nervously, and they try to talk for a minute. And they sort of step toward each other and step back. But eventually, each group of each two people, they kissed. So it's really remarkable. And then they sort of hug, and it was this strange moment. Well, so Jesus, in our text today, talks about conflict in the church and how to handle conflict in the church. And the first instruction is, if someone offends you, you need to go directly to that person and say, well, you need to say something that's kind of uncomfortable. In a way, if you tell someone that they've hurt your feeling, that's very much like a kiss, isn't it? What that requires is a kind of vulnerability, a kind of willingness to be open to another person. To go to someone and say, you know, I really need to talk to you because, you know, you did this and it really hurt me. It hurt my feelings. It caused me pain. It's difficult. I suppose there are other options. You could go tell someone else that someone had done it. And that's a nice way to avoid the difficulty of exposing ourselves. But it seems like that's one of the things that Jesus is trying to avoid in these instructions. You think about it, there's a sense of trust and openness here to go and talk to someone and trust that if you do that, they're going to respond in a way that's positive instead of saying, oh, well, you're too sensitive or something like that. Jesus is presupposing in this instruction that discipleship means a level of trust in which we can talk to one another directly as we need to. Because, you know, when we get together, it's just part of human relationship. There's going to be times of difficulty. So, I taught at MATC for 9 years before I went off to seminary. I taught writing, composition, and literature. So I fancied myself as a pretty darn good writer, thank you very much. So I went off to seminary thinking that I was going to I wasn't going to walk on water to seminary, but I was something like that, you know. And I went to my first class, and I had this teacher, Michael Kinneman. And he was a brilliant guy. He'd been all around the world. He was in charge of ecumenical conversations and blah-de-blah-de-blah, right? So he gave us a writing assignment, and my first writing assignment in seminary was to write a 2-page paper on some subject, which I can't remember. And I wrote 12 drafts of that paper. That paper, friends, that paper was perfect. It was, honestly. I got the paper back, and there was one word circled on it. Recursive. That's the word that I used. There was a circle around the word recursive. And the grade at the top, A-. Ah! I couldn't believe it.
was the official?
He was giving me an A minus. He was giving me an A minus. To say I was offended is to say only part of the truth. The truth was that I was deeply offended. And that happened a couple more times, and the class ended, and I got an A minus in the class. An A minus. So I went around to my friends, and anytime Dr. Michael Kinnaman's name came up, I had something to say about Dr. Michael Kinnaman. I had his mannerisms down in the class, you know, he'd say, and so this is very difficult. And they'd laugh, but that would be a nice bridge to say something nasty about his good professor. And I did that for a whole semester, and by the time the semester was over, I began to realize that the way I was talking about him was hurting everyone, because he was everyone's professor. He was a member of that whole group, that whole community. And I was talking about him in such an awful way, you know? And I began to wonder, what is it about an A minus that's such an affront to my sense of self, after all? You know? I made an appointment with Dr. Kinnaman. And I sat down with him and I said, Dr. Kinnaman, I need to apologize. I said, you gave me an A minus in class, and I've been saying a lot of nasty things about you to other people. And you know, that was a hard thing to do. Yeah? That was very much like giving him a kiss. It was. It was. But you know what? He said, well, it seems like most of the time, the people that we're most upset about are the people we have the most to learn from, in a way, he said. That's the reason why he was a professor. He said that. And you know what? I left that conversation and realized that I had something to work on in myself. What was I going to do with this need for perfection in myself? For somehow an A minus would cause me to rip someone apart because I had failed at who I thought I was. You know? The next semester, I took all my classes pass-fail. Ha ha ha. And I'll tell you what the hard part about it was. I couldn't motivate myself to do anything. I couldn't get my work done. Because I'd taken away this sort of part of my motivation. It was getting me, I found out it was really aiming for the A, perfection. That's what I was aiming for. When I took that away, I had to wrestle with this thing inside of me that was causing me to behave that way. It was quite an experience. Then I realized, as part of that experience, it's something that I continue to struggle with. It doesn't go away. It's still there. And I know that sometimes it can cause me to do and say things that I would prefer that I didn't do and say. And I learned that because I went and talked to Dr. Michael Kinnaman. When Jesus talks about going directly to a person, it is a radical concept. Instead of talking with others, go directly to a person. That's something that only church people really can do. And it happens because we have this whole community together in which I believe and I trust that we're going to stick together even when we disagree. Even when I come and say, I have to talk to you because I'm upset about something. Okay, let's talk. That's a radical idea. That we hold each other accountable and we talk directly to one another. That's the start of things, really, I think. Now, there was another YouTube video that came out after the kissing video. Do you know what it is? Does anyone know what it is already? You know where I'm going with this? Yeah, you don't want to admit how much time you spent on YouTube. That's what this is about. 20 people got together and slapped each other. Yeah, seriously. There were people, old and young, men and women, women and women, men and men. And they got in a room together, and they were in the same way about uncomfortable about kissing. The same thing with slapping. Now, what gave these people the idea to invite others to this, and why people would say yes, I have no concept. But what would happen is that they would get together, and they would start to talk, and they'd laugh, and they'd get embarrassed, and they'd say, okay, you go first. No, you go first. You know, they had this thing going, and then they'd give each other a slap, some little slap, some a little larger slap. And the funniest thing happened is what happened to most of them afterwards, they started hugging each other. They started laughing. They started, you know, I don't know what to say to you except that I think for church people, it's something like giving a stranger a kiss or something like slapping someone in the face to say, I feel hurt and I need to talk to you. But I think that what Jesus is trying to help us to see is there's a sort of strength of relationship. We're not strangers. We know each other, others failures and faults. I know mine are very visible to you, and you might be surprised to know that yours are as visible to me as yours are mine are to you. But I think that we're asked to take a chance to do something like, well, like what these YouTube videos show. And in the end, I think what happens is if we talk directly to each other, a strength of relationship comes up that allows us to tolerate the conflict that following Jesus actually always brings. If we don't talk directly to one another, if we're running away from conflict, then we can never really go toward the cross that Jesus calls us to. Amen.
Amen.